So what happens when a company that's all in on fighting Alzheimer's stumbles upon something totally unexpected? Today, we're diving into the story of Cognition Therapeutics. It's a biotech that just made a huge pivot, and it's all because they did one simple thing. They followed the data. Let's get into it.
You see, Cognition Therapeutics' main goal, their whole mission, was developing a drug called zervimesine for neurodegenerative diseases, with Alzheimer's right at the top of that list. But you know, in science, it's funny. Sometimes the biggest discoveries are the ones you weren't even looking for.
And boom, here it is. The result of that discovery, straight from their CEO, Lisa Ricciardi. The company is officially shifting its focus to a condition called Dementia with Lewy Bodies psychosis, or DLB. So why the sudden change? What on earth did they see in their data that was powerful enough to make them switch gears so dramatically?
Well, let's be clear, this pivot wasn't some random shot in the dark. No way. This was a really calculated decision, and it was driven by some powerful new evidence that basically pointed them down a completely new and maybe even faster path to a new drug.
Okay, so this is it. This is the data from their SHIMMER study that changed everything, and the difference is just stark. Look at this. The group of patients taking zervimesine, well, their key symptoms like psychosis and anxiety, they just stayed stable over 6 months. But the group on the placebo, their symptoms got a lot worse. I mean, you just can't ignore a result like that.
And here's the headline number, the one that really drove this whole decision. The drug showed an 86% slowing of progression in these symptoms compared to the placebo. 86%. In a clinical trial, that is a massive, massive signal. It's huge. So it makes you wonder, just how big is the problem they might have accidentally found a solution for? Yet to really get why that 86% figure is such a potential game changer, you have to understand the reality of DLB psychosis. And let me tell you, it is absolutely devastating.
Get this. As many as 80% of all patients with dementia with Lewy bodies will experience psychosis. This isn't some rare symptom. It's a core, defining part of the disease. It's so central, in fact, that just having hallucinations is one of the main things doctors look for to even make a diagnosis in the first place.
And for the families living with this, it is a daily nightmare. We're talking about debilitating hallucinations and even something called imposter delusions. Can you imagine? That's where a patient is completely convinced that their own family members have been replaced by strangers. It's just heartbreaking. Understandably, it leads to social withdrawal, isolation, and it's often the main reason a family has to make that agonizing decision to move someone into nursing care. And the absolute worst part? There are zero approved medications for this right now.
So you have this enormous unmet need, and you have this incredibly strong data. How does a company actually execute a shift like this? Well, it's a very careful, deliberate process. You don't do it overnight.
It all went down in a few key steps. It started, of course, with that super compelling data. Step 1. Next, they took that data to the FDA, and the agency basically said, wow, you're right, this is compelling. Then, the FDA did something really crucial. They pointed the company to their division of psychiatry. You know, the group with all the expertise in these kinds of trials. So now, the final step is in motion. They're planning a formal meeting to map out the exact path to getting this drug approved. But, you know, this whole pivot wasn't just about data and regulators. Not at all. There was a huge human factor here. The powerful voices of patients and their families showed an absolutely overwhelming demand for this drug.
And you could really see this demand in their expanded access program. That's a program that lets patients with really serious diseases get access to a drug even before it's approved. And get this, it actually started because the family of someone in the trial saw the drug's impact firsthand and made a donation. As soon as it opened, the program filled up almost immediately. And even though it's open label, meaning everyone knows they're getting the drug, the feedback was just so consistent. Families kept saying it was making a real, tangible difference in their daily lives.
All right, so with all this momentum behind DLB, there's an obvious question for anyone who's been following this company. What about the original mission? What happens to the Alzheimer's research? And here's the key takeaway. They are not abandoning the Alzheimer's program. The company is being very clear that they remain committed. However, because the data in DLB is so strong, it allows for smaller, shorter, and faster trials. And what that means is that DLB now represents the quickest, most efficient path to getting a drug approved and on the market. And you can see that commitment right here on this timeline. Their major phase 2 trial for Alzheimer's, called the START trial, is still very much active.
They finished enrolling all 545 participants back in late 2025. That study has an 18-month treatment period, which means we should be expecting the big top-line results sometime in 2027.
Of course, in the biotech world, a great idea and a big pivot, well, they're only possible if you have the cash to actually fund them. So we've got to talk about the money. Let's look at their financial runway.
Okay, so at the end of 2025, Cognition had about $37 million in cash and equivalents. On top of that, they've also got another $35.7 million in grant funds locked in from the National Institute on Aging that helps support their research. So what does all that cash translate to? Well, the company estimates it has enough money to fund all its operations through the second quarter of 2027. And notice that timing, Q2 2027. That lines up perfectly with when they expect to get the results from that big Alzheimer's START trial. That's probably not a coincidence.
So we're left with this one big question. You have a company that followed the science, listened to patients, and made a bold pivot toward a devastating condition with absolutely no approved treatments. Could this unexpected turn in their journey lead to a historic first-ever medicine for people suffering from DLB psychosis? That's a question the next few years are going to answer.